Tech illiterate. That's what my son Daniel called me the night I asked him about the $500,000 worth of Bitcoin I'd been saving for over a decade. Mom, he smirked, leaning back in his leather chair like some kind of kingpin. You don't even know how to copy and paste. Crypto is way above your pay grade. I'll manage it for you now. Just relax. Relax? Honey, I didn't survive 68 years, 2 recessions, and 1 cheating mortgage broker without learning how to smell a rat. And that night, I smelled a whole infestation. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to tell you is how I went from pawn to queen, from being told I was too old to understand, to watching the FBI drag my only son away in handcuffs. Watch me. It started quietly, as most betrayals do. My husband Robert passed 3 years ago, leaving me with a modest pension and a crypto wallet we had built together when Bitcoin was just a gamble, whispered about in basements and college dorms. We bought in early, not because we were geniuses, but because Robert believed in preparing for storms. He said, "Eleanor, the world's changing. Someday, this digital money will be our parachute." He wasn't wrong. That parachute swelled into $500,000. My safety net, my independence, my proof that an old English teacher could learn new tricks. But grief has a way of softening your edges. After Robert's funeral, Daniel slid back into my life like a vulture in designer sneakers. He spoke in that tech jargon blockchain, ledger, 2-factor authentication, as if he were speaking the language of gods and I was some primitive worshiper. "Mom, just give me your keys and seed phrases. I'll handle it. You don't want to mess something up." At first, I believed him. He was my son. My only son. What kind of mother suspects her child of theft when he says, "I'll protect you"? But protection turned to control. Control turned to contempt. And contempt, honey, always shows its true face. One evening, I asked him directly, "Daniel, I'd like to check my wallet, just to see." He laughed. Full belly laugh, the kind that makes your skin crawl. "You? Check? Mom, you're tech illiterate. You'd probably delete it all by accident." That laugh was my breaking point. I may not code, I may not game, but I sure as hell can read a balance sheet. I taught entire generations how to dissect Shakespeare. Don't tell me I can't learn a password manager. I went home that night, packed my late husband's laptop, and whispered to his photograph, "Robert, I'll figure this out. He won't get away with it." Because, honey, betrayal from strangers is one thing. Betrayal from your blood? That's DNA, not family. And Daniel was about to learn that the pawn he mocked as illiterate was already 3 moves from checkmate. By the end of that week, I had lost more than my money. I had lost my trust, my footing, my place at my own table. But I had also gained something sharper: resolve. Want to know how I went from being locked out of my own crypto wallet to standing in my living room while FBI agents thanked me for my cooperation? Stay with me. The story has more twists than a Shakespeare play, rewritten by a drunk pretzel maker. Because when a son calls his mother tech illiterate, he might just forget who taught him to read in the first place. After Robert's funeral, the house felt like a museum. His jacket still hung on the hook by the door, his reading glasses perched on the side table. I could almost hear his voice in the creak of the floorboards. For a while, I moved like a ghost through those rooms, careful not to disturb the relics of a life shared. That's when Daniel came gliding back in, all cologne and charm. He hadn't been much of a presence while his father was sick, always too busy, always on a project. But after the burial, he appeared with flowers, dinner deliveries, even a half-hearted hug. "Mom," he said, standing in the kitchen with his sleeves rolled to his elbows, "you shouldn't worry about finances now. Dad wanted me to look after you. I'll handle the crypto wallet. Too complicated for you." He wrapped the sentence in silk, but underneath, it was steel. I tried to smile. "I can manage, Daniel. Your father always explained things to me." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head like I was a child. "Explained, sure. But you didn't understand. Look, I work in tech. This is what I do. You taught literature. I taught myself blockchains and wallets. Division of labor, right?" I wanted to believe him. After all, wasn't this what children were supposed to do? Step in when you falter? Protect you from a changing world? But Daniel's eyes weren't protective, they were hungry. The mask slipped little by little. One Sunday afternoon, I asked about the balance. "Just curious," I said. "Where does it stand?" He waved his phone dismissively. It's fine. Market's up. Don't stress about numbers, Mom. But I'd like to see. Mom, he cut me off, sharper this time. You wouldn't even know what you're looking at. It's like trying to teach a dog calculus. Pointless. The words hit like a slap. A dog. My own son compared me to a dog. That night, alone in bed, I whispered to Robert's photograph. He doesn't see me anymore. Not as his mother, just as an obstacle. 2 weeks later, the contempt grew bolder. Daniel showed up with his fiancée, a sharp-tongued woman named Claire, who looked at my living room like it was a garage sale. She ran a manicured finger across my mantle, wrinkling her nose. So, when do you plan on downsizing? She asked casually, like it was already decided. Downsizing? I repeated. Claire smiled, eyes cold. Well, Daniel and I were thinking, this house is too big for one person. And it's in his name now, isn't it? I turned to Daniel. In your name? He smirked, sipping from his craft beer. Well, technically, yeah. You handed over the wallet, remember? The house mortgage was tied into that account. So I shifted things. Paperwork. You don't need to worry, Mom. You'll always have a room. Always have a room. In my own house. That was the night the mask finally fell. He wasn't protecting me. He wasn't even pretending anymore. The breaking point came at dinner. Daniel ordered takeout steak for him, sushi for Claire, and a wilted salad for me. When I reached for the check, a habit from years of hospitality, he slid it away. Mom, he said, almost laughing, you don't pay anymore. You can't. I'm the one with the access. You're just the wife. Dad earned it. I'll grow it. You should just enjoy what little time you have. Just the wife. The phrase stung like acid. After 40 years of standing beside Robert, balancing budgets, cooking meals, editing his speeches late at night, I was demoted to just the wife. That night, lying in the dark, I repeated the words over and over, burning them into memory. Just the wife. Just the wife. Honey, nothing lights a fire in an old woman like being told she's irrelevant. The next morning, I found Daniel in Robert's study, his laptop open, lines of code streaming down the screen. Daniel, I said quietly, I want my wallet back. He didn't even look up. Not happening. It's mine. He closed the laptop and finally met my eyes. His smile was thin, reptilian. Correction, Mom. It was yours. Now it's ours. Claire and I know how to manage it. You'd probably lose the seed phrase in a drawer full of knitting needles. I clenched my fists. Your father trusted me. Daniel leaned forward, his voice low. Dad's gone, and without me, you'd be lost. Face it, you're old, you're out of touch, and you need me. Be grateful I'm not putting you in a home. A home. There it was. The unspoken threat, now spoken. When he left that afternoon, I sat in Robert's chair, staring at the darkened laptop screen. My reflection looked back at me, older, lined, weary, but my eyes burned. If Daniel thought I was a pawn, he was about to learn what happens when the pawn makes it across the board. The eviction didn't come with sheriffs or papers. It came with my son's voice, smooth and cruel. Mom, Claire and I need space, Daniel announced one Friday evening, dropping my overnight bag at my feet like luggage at an airport. This house isn't suited for 3 adults. You'll be more comfortable somewhere else. Somewhere else? I repeated. He grinned like it was a joke. Yeah, a motel, maybe. I'll cover the first couple of nights. Don't worry, I'll transfer you some cash just until you get settled. Settled, that was his word. As if a woman of 68 who had lived in the same home for 40 years could be settled into a roadside motel like a traveling salesman. I stood there, staring at the floorboards. Robert laid down himself. At the walls I painted after we'd paid off the mortgage. My house. My history. And now, my exile. Daniel pressed a wad of bills into my hand, 2 crisp hundreds and some crumpled 20s. This should hold you over. Like a tip to a waitress. Claire's voice chimed from behind him, sharp as glass. Make sure she doesn't forget her pills. Old people get confused. I felt the blood drain from my face. Not because I was confused, but because I saw it clearly. They wanted me gone. Out of sight. Out of the way. So I packed my dignity alongside my nightgown and drove away from the only home I'd ever known. The motel smelled of bleach and mildew, a cocktail that clung to your skin no matter how much you scrubbed. The neon sign outside blinked "vacancy" in red letters, as if mocking me. I checked in under my own name, Mrs. Eleanor Grant, and slid the bills across the counter. The clerk, a teenager with acne and earbuds, barely looked up. Room 12, affordable. That word again, affordable. As if I were nothing more than a budget line on someone else's ledger. The room itself was a box with peeling wallpaper, a bedspread that looked older than me, and a single buzzing lamp. I sat on the edge of the mattress, clutching the thin pillow, and laughed. It wasn't joy. It was disbelief. Honey, I had gone from homeowner to homeless in less than a week, all because my own son decided I was too old for crypto. That first night, I counted the bills over and over. $247. My entire safety net, reduced from $500 kelvins in Bitcoin to a handful of paper crumpled in my purse. I thought about Robert. He had always promised me security, always said, "You'll never be left out in the cold, Eleanor." Well, Robert, here I was, out in the cold. The next morning, I walked to the diner across the street for coffee. The waitress poured it into a chipped mug, black and bitter. I stared at the steam rising and whispered to myself, "This is the bottom." And then, as often happens at the bottom, something shifted. I remembered Robert's words. "Keep a copy of everything, Eleanor, just in case." In the back of my purse, folded beneath old receipts, was a slip of paper in Robert's handwriting, a 12-word phrase, his parachute, he called it, the seed phrase for our wallet. I unfolded it, fingers trembling. Could this still mean something? Or had Daniel already moved everything out? Back at the motel, I opened Robert's old laptop. The Wi-Fi crawled like molasses, but it worked. I typed carefully, double-checking every word of that phrase. The wallet loaded. Balance, $0. My chest tightened. Gone. Every coin, every cent. Then I noticed something. Transaction history. Outflows. Addresses. Someone had moved the funds recently. And not to one wallet, to several. It was a shell game, fast and sloppy. Transfers in the dead of night, amounts split and scattered. That was Daniel's mistake. He thought I was too old to notice patterns. But honey, I'd spent decades grading essays, circling plagiarism, spotting lies hidden between the lines. Patterns were my specialty. I printed the transaction history from the motel's front desk computer, the paper still warm in my hands. Evidence. Proof. That night, I called Daniel. "Where is it?" I asked, my voice steady. "Where's what?" His tone was casual, smug. "The money. The Bitcoin. Robert's parachute." A pause, then laughter. "Mom, don't be ridiculous. You wouldn't even know where to look. That stuff is gone. Too technical for you. Just enjoy the cash I gave you." I let him laugh. Let him believe. Because what he didn't know was that his laugh had already given me more than he realized. It gave me purpose. At midnight, I sat by the motel window, the neon vacancy blinking against my face, and whispered, "You think I'm powerless, Daniel. But pawns cross the board every day, and when they do, they become queens." I folded the transaction history, tucked it into my purse, and made myself a promise. Tomorrow, I would call a lawyer. And that laugh of his, the one that reduced me to tech illiterate, would be Exhibit A, in a case that would bring his whole world crashing down. The motel's coffee was lukewarm battery acid, but it fueled me enough to make the bus ride downtown. My purse felt heavier than it should, stuffed with transaction printouts, Robert's seed phrase scribbled on a slip of paper, and the shame of being a mother banished like a stray dog. Jonathan Blake's office was tucked into the third floor of a sandstone building, the kind with brass letters on the door and a secretary who still used a fountain pen. The moment I walked in, I felt Robert's presence. He'd consulted Jonathan on tax issues years ago, trusted him with contracts I hadn't cared to read. "Mrs. Grant?" The secretary stood, her eyes widening. "Mr. Blake was wondering when you might come. Please, right this way." Jonathan rose from behind a mahogany desk when I entered. He was in his 70s, white hair combed back, the kind of man who looked more like a judge than a lawyer. His voice carried both warmth and warning. "Eleanor, I was about to call you again. Daniel said you were traveling. Is that true?" Traveling. The lie tasted bitter. "Jonathan, the only trip I've taken lately is from my house to a budget motel. My son threw me out." He blinked, then motioned for me to sit. Start from the beginning. I laid it all out: the $500 Kelvin's wallet, the seed phrase, the zero balance, the motel, the laughter in Daniel's voice when I asked where it went. Jonathan listened without interrupting, his fingers steepled under his chin. When I slid the transaction printouts across his desk, his eyes sharpened. "These," he said slowly, "aren't amateur moves. He's scattering the funds deliberately through multiple wallets, different exchanges. Someone is advising him." I swallowed. "Claire? Possible. Or someone from his circle. Eleanor, your son is committing financial fraud. This isn't just a family squabble. We're talking wire fraud, theft, possibly money laundering." The words landed like bricks. Fraud, theft, money laundering. My Daniel, the boy who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares, was now a criminal. Jonathan opened a file drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "Your husband updated his estate documents 18 months before he passed. Did Daniel ever show you the revised trust?" "No. He said Robert left everything in his care." Jonathan's mouth tightened. "That's not true. According to Robert's final documents, you are the primary beneficiary. The house, the assets, the majority of the investments, all in your name. Daniel was left with a smaller trust. But there's a catch." He slid the papers toward me. I read Robert's neat signature, notarized, witnessed. My heart pounded. "To my wife, Eleanor Grant, I leave our primary residence and 70% of all financial holdings." 70%. The house, security, mine. "To my son, Daniel Grant, I leave 30% of assets to be held in trust. Distributions contingent upon his treatment of his mother following my death." I froze. Contingent upon his treatment of me. Robert had predicted this betrayal, written it into the very documents Daniel tried to twist. Jonathan leaned back. "By throwing you out, by taking your funds, Daniel has voided his claim. Legally, every cent is yours now." The irony was so sharp, it almost made me laugh. Daniel had stolen $500 Kelvins in Bitcoin only to cut himself off from millions more. Jonathan wasn't done. He opened a second folder. "There's more. Eleanor, I've been contacted by the authorities. The FBI flagged several of Daniel's transactions as suspicious. They suspect he's moving stolen cryptocurrency through shell wallets. That's why I was trying to reach you. They thought you might be a victim. Turns out they were right." The room tilted. FBI. Fraud. My son's arrogance had caught the eye of the federal government. Jonathan's gaze hardened. "This is no longer just about inheritance or family squabbles. Eleanor, your son is in criminal territory. And if you don't step forward, they might drag you in as well, claiming you were complicit, that you benefited." I gripped the arm of the chair. "What do I do?" Jonathan's voice steadied, deliberate. "Now, my dear, we call the FBI ourselves. We present the seed phrase, the transaction history, the will. We show them you're the victim, and then we let them handle Daniel." I thought of Daniel's smug grin, Claire's icy tone, the way they dismissed me as tech illiterate. My own son thought he could outplay me in a game Robert had already scripted. I pressed the papers flat against Jonathan's desk. "Do it. Freeze everything. Let's see how smug he is when his cards decline at dinner." Jonathan nodded, already dialing. "Operation Queen," he muttered. "Seems fitting." And honey, for the first time in weeks, I felt the tide turning. At 4:12 p.m., Jonathan's secretary handed me a glass of water as the last call ended. Every account linked to Daniel was frozen. Every fraudulent transfer flagged. By dinner time, my son's empire of lies would collapse. My phone buzzed. Daniel's name lit up the screen. "Mom," he said, panic in his voice. "Something's wrong with the accounts. The exchanges are locking me out. What did you do?" I held the phone steady, my voice cool. "Hello, Daniel. I'm sitting in Jonathan Blake's office. You remember him? The man who read the real will your father signed, the one you forgot to mention while you were shoving me out of my own house." Silence. Then, "You don't understand. It's complicated. I understand perfectly. You stole from me. You lied. And now, the FBI understands too." He cursed under his breath. "You wouldn't dare. Watch me." And with that, I ended the call. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a pawn. I felt like a queen, sliding across the board, cornering the king. And the irony, honey? It was almost poetic. They call it asset freezing. I call it poetic justice. By the time the clock on Jonathan's office wall struck 6 p.m., every bank account, every crypto wallet Daniel touched had been locked tighter than a nun's diary. It wasn't just my money anymore, it was his accounts, too. The ones he thought were untouchable. Jonathan tapped his pen on the desk like a judge delivering sentence. Within the hour, the Bureau will flag every transaction. Daniel's already on their radar. What we've done is simply light a match in a room full of gasoline. I smiled grimly. Good. Let him choke on the smoke. The first call came at 6:14 p.m. My phone buzzed so hard I thought it might leap off the desk. Mom! Daniel's voice was raw panic, no smug veneer left. All my cards just got declined, even my Amex. The exchanges say my accounts are suspended. What did you do? I took my time answering. Sipped water. Cleared my throat. I'm in Jonathan Blake's office. You remember him, don't you? The man who read the real will, the one your father signed, the one you lied about? Silence. Then, the sound of his breathing, shallow and furious. That's not possible. You don't even know how wallets work. Daniel, I said softly, I may not know how to code, but I know how to dial a lawyer. And the FBI knows how to follow a paper trail, or in this case, a blockchain. The second call came at 6:32 p.m. Claire this time. She didn't waste words. Eleanor, what did you tell the banks? You've ruined everything. No, Claire, I corrected her. Daniel ruined everything when he called his mother tech illiterate and shoved her into a motel like last week's garbage. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Do you realize you're putting your own son at risk of prison? Families handle these things privately. I let the silence stretch. Then, family doesn't steal $500 kelvins from family. That's not family. That's DNA. Jonathan leaned closer, whispering, Keep them talking. Every word is more rope for their own noose. So I did. I let Claire ramble about appearances, about how Daniel's career in fintech would collapse if anyone found out, about how I should be reasonable. Finally, I cut her off. Claire, let me make this clear. You're married to a man who just committed wire fraud. That makes you a co-conspirator. Reasonable left the building a long time ago. I hung up before she could respond. At 7:05 p.m., Jonathan's desk phone rang. He put it on speaker. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, female. This is Special Agent Rivera with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We've reviewed the documents you provided. Mrs. Grant, thank you for coming forward. Jonathan gestured for me to speak. My throat tightened, but my voice held steady. Agent Rivera, I just want to make sure they can't hurt anyone else. My son thinks he's above the law. He needs to learn otherwise. Her tone softened. You've done the right thing. We'll handle it from here. Expect us to make contact again tomorrow morning. Jonathan nodded, satisfied. Operation Queen is officially underway. The words sent a shiver down my spine. Not of fear of power. For the first time since Robert's death, I wasn't being handled, dismissed, or pitied. I was in control, but Daniel wasn't finished. At 8:47 p.m., he showed up at the motel, banged on the flimsy door until it rattled on its hinges. Mom, open this damn door. I didn't. I sat on the bed, phone in hand, recording every word. You can't do this to me, to us. Do you have any idea what kind of trouble I'm in now? Trouble. That word almost made me laugh. He'd dragged me through humiliation, homelessness, and theft, and now he wanted sympathy because his schemes were unraveling. I pressed record louder, speaking through the door. Daniel, you should go. The FBI will be in touch. There was a pause, then a low growl. You think you're clever? You think you can outplay me? You're nothing without Dad's money. Nothing. I whispered into the recorder. Watch me. His footsteps stormed away, the sound of tires screeching in the lot moments later. Jonathan called at 9:30. You handled that perfectly. With the recording, we have direct evidence of his state of mind. Tomorrow, the Bureau will move forward. Eleanor, he's cornered. It's checkmate in 3. I set the phone down, stared at the peeling wallpaper, and let myself breathe. The pawn had become the queen. And honey, it felt damn good. They didn't go quietly. Thieves rarely do. By noon the next day, the FBI made their move. Agent Rivera had promised me swift action, but even I didn't expect to watch my son's arrest play out on the 6 o'clock news. Breaking. A local fintech consultant has been taken into custody in connection with a federal cryptocurrency fraud investigation. There he was, Daniel being walked out of his glass tower office, tie askew, wrists cuffed. Claire trailed behind, her designer heels clacking against the pavement, shrieking at the cameras about a misunderstanding. The irony was so perfect, it was almost comical. The man who called me tech illiterate couldn't even cover his own digital footprints. At 7:42 p.m., my motel phone rang. I knew the number before I picked up. Claire. Eleanor. Her voice was clipped, desperate. We need to talk. This has gone too far. Too far? I repeated. You mean past the point where my son stole $500,000 and threw me into a budget motel? Or past the point where the FBI flagged his crimes? Her tone softened, syrupy, like poison in tea. Listen to me. We can fix this. Daniel made mistakes, but prison won't solve anything. What if we came to an arrangement? I almost laughed. An arrangement? Yes, she pressed on. Drop the charges. We'll compensate you. $2 million, clean, no questions asked. You'll be secure for life, and Daniel avoids prison. Jonathan sat across from me in the motel room, listening on speaker. His eyebrows arched so high they nearly disappeared into his hairline. He scribbled conspiracy, attempted bribery on his notepad, and underlined it twice. I let Claire ramble. She listed numbers like she was ordering from a menu. 2 million, fine, 5. We can liquidate assets, Eleanor. It's better for everyone if this stays out of court. I kept my voice calm, cold. Your husband's entire career was built on fraud, and you want to buy me off with a fraction of what you stole? Her mask slipped. The poison in her tone curdled into steel. Think carefully. Trials drag families through the mud. Every private detail becomes public. Do you really want your husband's name smeared alongside this circus? Jonathan mouthed. Don't take the bait. I folded my hands. Claire, if you think intimidation works on me, you're dumber than you look in those courtroom heels. Robert raised me to endure storms, not bow to bullies. The trial will go forward. And the mud? It'll stick to Daniel, not Robert. I hung up before she could spit out another word. At 8:30 p.m., the FBI delivered the update personally. 2 agents came to the motel with files so thick they looked like phone books. Mrs. Grant, Rivera said, sliding the papers across the bedspread. Your son and daughter-in-law are being charged with wire fraud, elder financial abuse, and attempted obstruction of justice. The attempted bribe strengthens our case. I nodded, my jaw tight. Good. Let him see what justice tastes like. The second agent, a younger man with a scar on his jawline, added, bails set high, $250,000 each. Given the frozen accounts, they'll scramble. Unless, of course, their extended family steps in. I thought of Claire's parents' old money, old arrogance. If anyone would bankroll their escape, it was them. And right on cue, my motel phone rang again the next morning. Mrs. Grant, the voice purred, smooth as silk and twice as insincere. It was Patricia Hayes, Claire's mother, a woman who wore pearls like armor and thought her money could bulldoze any obstacle. I believe there's been a misunderstanding, she began. Kevin and Claire made some poor choices, but surely you don't want this to ruin everyone's lives. What if we arranged something more generous? How generous? I asked flatly. $5 million, cash. You keep your dignity, your comfort, and we avoid a messy trial. Jonathan leaned forward, whispering, keep her talking. I asked, and what do I give up in this so-called generous deal? Your testimony, your cooperation with the FBI. In return, the Hayes family ensures you never want for anything again. It's a win-win. Win-win. That phrase snapped something inside me. Patricia, your son-in-law forged documents. Your daughter covered his crimes. They threw me out of my house and drained my savings. You call that a misunderstanding? I call it criminal. Her tone hardened, aristocratic frost. You'll regret this. Kevin has information about your late husband's dealings. Skeletons you wouldn't want dragged into the light. Perhaps you should reconsider before we air everyone's dirty laundry. I sat taller, fire coursing through me. Threats now? Patricia, let me be clear. Your family's dirty laundry is already on the courthouse steps. And Robert's memory? He was 10 times the person your fraud of a son could ever be. If Kevin wants to sling mud, let him. I'll be here, watching him sink in it. I ended the call. Jonathan's grin spread like a cat who'd caught the canary. Perfect. Witness intimidation, attempted blackmail. They just handed us even more charges. That night, I stood by the motel window, watching the neon sign flicker. For the first time, I didn't feel like the victim in this story. I felt like the executioner waiting for dawn. Claire thought money could buy me off. Patricia thought threats could scare me. But honey, they'd all underestimated one thing: a mother's fury sharpened by betrayal. They had thrown me into a motel with nothing but a suitcase and a memory of Robert's voice in my ear. And from that low point, I was building my empire of justice. Operation Queen wasn't over. It was just getting started. Storms don't just wash away dirt. They unearth bones. I thought Daniel's betrayal was the worst thing I'd ever endure. But the Hayes family, with their polished smiles and veiled threats, were about to teach me that the past can be weaponized too. 3 days after the arrests, Jonathan arrived at the motel carrying a leather briefcase that looked heavier than sin itself. He set it on the table, clicked it open, and pulled out a stack of documents. "Eleanor," he said carefully, "I need you to see this before the Hayes family uses it against you." The top sheet was a wire transfer, $1.2 million, signed by Robert, my late husband. The recipient? A shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. My stomach dropped. "What is this?" Jonathan's jaw tightened. "It's not just one. Robert made multiple transfers like this over the last decade. Consulting fees, offshore accounts, payments to entities that don't actually exist. The Hayes family's lawyers uncovered them, and they're threatening to bring it all into court." I shook my head. No, Robert was meticulous, careful, honest. Jonathan placed a hand over the papers. "Eleanor, Robert may have been many things to you, but financially, he was playing a game you didn't see." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the motel bed, staring at the ceiling, whispering to Robert's photograph on my nightstand. "Did you know, Robert? Did you know our son would inherit not just your name but your shadows?" At 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and spread the documents across the bed. Offshore accounts, fake consulting firms. A pattern so consistent even I, the so-called tech illiterate, could see it. Robert had been moving money, hiding it, maybe even laundering it. And suddenly, Patricia Hayes' smug confidence made sense. Her son-in-law, Kevin, had dug through my husband's past and found enough skeletons to build an army. The next morning, Jonathan introduced me to a woman named Detective Carol Chen, a financial crimes investigator with eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She wore no jewelry, no makeup, just a steel gray suit and the look of someone who had seen too many ruined lives. She flipped through the documents with clinical precision. "Your husband wasn't just dabbling. These transfers suggest long-term laundering, likely tied to organized crime networks." The words stung like acid. "Laundering? Are you saying Robert was a criminal?" Her gaze softened, but only slightly. "I'm saying the evidence points that way. Whether he was a willing participant or coerced, we don't know yet. But if this goes public, the government could seize your assets as proceeds of crime. House, accounts, everything." The room spun. For weeks I'd fought to reclaim what was mine, and now the ground shifted again. If Robert's money was dirty, then Daniel's theft was just the opening act of a much darker play. Jonathan spoke firmly. "Eleanor, the Hayes family intends to use this. They'll argue you benefited from Robert's crimes, making you complicit. It's a desperate ploy, but it could work if the jury buys it." I clutched the edge of the table. "So what do I do? Let them destroy his name? Destroy mine?" Detective Chen leaned forward. "There's another option. You could go to the FBI first. Disclose everything voluntarily. Position yourself as a victim of Robert's financial secrets, just as you're a victim of Daniel's theft. If you hide it, they'll bury you with it. If you expose it, you control the narrative. Expose Robert. My Robert. The man who bought me roses every anniversary, who taught Daniel to ride a bike, who whispered Shakespeare lines in my ear just to make me laugh. Could I really drag his memory into a federal investigation?" That evening, as I sat alone, Daniel called from jail. His voice was calmer now, calculated, like a man playing his last card. "Mom, you need to stop cooperating. You don't know what you're stirring up. I know you stole from me, Daniel. I was protecting you." His laugh was bitter. "Dad's money wasn't clean, and you think the government won't figure that out? You'll lose everything. Unless what? Unless you work with me. With Claire, we can spin this. We tell the FBI you didn't know about the laundering, that you trusted Dad. They'll cut you a deal. You'll keep the house. Maybe $5 million in clean assets. The rest goes back. But you walk free. I nearly dropped the phone. It was the same script Claire had offered, the same poisoned bargain. You expect me, I whispered, to cover for your crimes by confessing to Roberts? It's practical, Daniel snapped. You'll either cooperate or you'll watch marshals padlock your house. For a moment, I heard not my son but a stranger, a man who'd inherited Robert's cunning but none of his love. I hung up without a word. Later, Jonathan found me staring at the motel window. Eleanor, what are you thinking? I'm thinking about Robert, I murmured, about whether I ever knew him at all. And about Daniel. He thinks he's holding all the cards because he's found my husband's ghosts. But ghosts can't hurt the living unless we let them. Jonathan nodded slowly. Then it's time, Eleanor. We go to the FBI ourselves. We show them the whole picture, and we let them decide who the real criminals are. I looked down at the pile of documents, Robert's signature staring back at me like an accusation. For the first time, I didn't see my husband's hand. I saw evidence. And I realized something cold and clear. If the Hayes family wanted to weaponize Robert's secrets, I'd have to wield them first. Honey, the irony was cruel but perfect. My son had mocked me as illiterate, but in the end, I was the one reading the fine print on everyone's lives, Robert's, Daniel's, even my own. And tomorrow? Tomorrow I'd walk into the FBI's office with a file that could burn us all. The pawn wasn't just becoming the queen anymore. She was rewriting the rules of the entire game. They say the FBI doesn't deal in emotions, cold facts, hard evidence. But honey, when Agent Rivera looked me in the eye and asked, Mrs. Grant, would you be willing to wear a wire? I felt something close to righteous fire. For weeks, Daniel had called me tech illiterate. Now I was about to out-tech him with a piece of equipment no bigger than a lipstick tube. The bureau set up in Jonathan's office. Papers cleared, blinds drawn. Detective Chen clipped the recorder to my blouse, testing levels. Speak naturally, don't provoke, just let them talk. Rivera leaned in. When they offer the deal, confirm details, we'll be listening. I nodded, heart pounding. And if they realize? Rivera's lips curved into a thin smile. Then we walk in and end it. The call came at 7:13 p.m. Daniel's voice, shaky but rehearsed. Mom, Claire and I want to meet. Tonight. Somewhere private. Where? I asked. Our house. 8 o'clock. Bring Jonathan if you want. We'll work this out. I agreed. But inside, I knew. This wasn't a reconciliation. This was a final gambit. The Hayes living room smelled like desperation and expensive cologne. Claire perched on the sofa in a silk blouse, eyes red but calculating. Daniel paced the floor, sleeves rolled, pretending to be in control. Mom, he started, you have to understand. Dad's money, it wasn't clean. You'll lose it all if you fight. But if you take our deal, you keep the house and $5 million. That's more than enough. Claire slid a folder across the coffee table. Sign this agreement. Withdraw your statements. The FBI never needs to know the rest. I glanced at the folder but didn't touch it. My voice stayed calm, steady. So you're asking me to help you profit from your crimes by sacrificing Robert's name and most of what he left? Daniel stopped pacing, eyes sharp. It's not a sacrifice, it's survival. Otherwise, you'll be dragged down too. You'll be the widow of a criminal. They'll seize everything. I leaned back, studying him. For the first time, I didn't see my son. I saw a man cornered by his own arrogance. And what do you two get out of this arrangement? I asked. Claire's lips curved. Immunity, clean records, a chance to move on. There it was the confession Rivera wanted. I could almost hear the bureau scribbling notes behind the van parked down the block. I let silence hang, then murmured, clean assets. That's an interesting phrase. Daniel frowned. Mom, this isn't the time for sarcasm. Oh, but it is, I said softly. Because you see, I've been called a lot of things lately. Useless, tech illiterate, too old. But tonight, I'm the one holding all the cards. That was the cue. The front door burst open. Federal agents. Nobody move. Rivera strode in, flanked by 2 agents in tactical vests. Daniel froze mid-step. Claire's silk composure shattered into raw panic. What? What is this? She shrieked. Rivera held up a warrant. Daniel Grant, Claire Hayes, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder abuse, and attempted obstruction of justice. Daniel spun toward me, betrayal etched on his face. Mom, you set us up? I met his eyes without flinching. No, Daniel. You set yourself up. I just pressed record. As agents cuffed them, Claire wailed about her reputation, her children, her future. Daniel stayed silent, jaw clenched, eyes burning with a fury that once might have pierced me. But not tonight. Tonight I saw the truth. He wasn't angry at me. He was angry at being beaten at his own game. Rivera turned to me. Mrs. Grant, are you all right? I straightened my shoulders. Better than all right. For the first time in months, I can breathe. On the way out, Daniel twisted in the doorway. You don't understand, Mom. Dad wasn't who you thought he was. Rivera yanked him forward before he could finish, but his words clung to the air like smoke. I stood in the Hayes living room, the silence deafening after the chaos. My hand brushed the edge of the unsigned folder on the table. Clean assets. Survival. All lies. Jonathan placed a steady hand on my arm. You did it, Eleanor. Operation Queen is complete. But I knew it wasn't. Not entirely. Because Daniel's parting words had cracked open the last door in this labyrinth. Robert's secrets. And tomorrow, honey, I was going to open it all the way. That night, back at the motel, I poured myself a glass of the cheap Merlot Daniel once sneered at and whispered to Robert's photograph. They thought they could buy me off. They thought fear would silence me. But the irony is too perfect, Robert. They underestimated me the same way they underestimated you. And now it's my move. Honey, betrayal is ugly. But watching betrayers walk out in handcuffs, that's art. And this story wasn't finished. Not yet. Victory doesn't always sound like a cheer. Sometimes it sounds like the slam of a cell door. 2 weeks after Daniel and Claire were taken away, I moved out of the motel. Not back into their glass and marble house of lies, but into my home, Robert's and mine, the one they thought they could steal. I slept in my own bed that first night, and when the morning sun spilled across the room, I realized the house finally felt like mine. Not because Robert was gone, not because the will said so, but because I defended it. I defended me. The FBI wrapped their investigation tighter than a drum. Rivera kept me updated. Mrs. Grant, your cooperation sealed this case. The recordings, the documents, you made this possible. But as the dust settled, I faced a question no agent could answer. What would I do with all this money? This inheritance still clouded by Robert's secrets. Jonathan reminded me, legally, it's yours. But legacy isn't measured in accounts, Eleanor. It's measured in what you do next. That night, sitting in Robert's old study, I made a decision. I wouldn't let my son's greed define my future. I wouldn't let Patricia Hayes' threats hang over me. And I sure as hell wouldn't let Robert's shadows swallow me. So I started the Eleanor Grant Foundation for Elder Justice. $15 million dedicated to protecting seniors from the very betrayal I endured. Free legal aid, hotlines, education programs. Honey, if I could be tricked by my own son, anyone could. And I refused to let another woman my age end up in a motel with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. 6 months later, I stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., giving testimony before the Senate Special Committee on Aging. My voice didn't shake. I was called tech illiterate, too old to understand, useless. But I stand here today as proof that seniors aren't powerless. We are not burdens. We are not pawns. And when families betray us, the law must be our shield. The committee applauded. Cameras flashed. Headlines the next day called me the Queen who fought back. The irony was almost poetic. As for Daniel, he pled guilty. Claire too. Wire fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy, 18 months in federal prison, with probation after. Not the life sentence their arrogance deserved, but enough to stain their reputations forever. He wrote to me once. Just once. Mom, please forgive me. I was scared. I didn't mean to hurt you. I folded the letter neatly, placed it in a drawer, and never answered. Forgiveness is a gift, and Daniel hadn't earned it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because family protects you when you're weak. DNA betrays you when you're convenient. That was the line I drew, clear as ink. Robert's secrets? The Bureau confirmed what I'd feared. Yes, he had played with shadows, laundering money for bigger players than I could imagine. But he wasn't just a criminal. He was an informant. For over a decade, Robert had fed the FBI intel, dismantling entire networks. The money he left me wasn't just tainted. It was legitimized through cooperation. Blood diamonds turned into pearls. His final act of love was ensuring I'd be protected even if he never told me. The irony was so perfect it made me laugh and cry all at once. 1 year later, my life was unrecognizable. The foundation had helped hundreds of seniors reclaim stolen pensions, homes, even dignity. Netflix signed a documentary deal. The Mother's Revenge, they called it. The very motel where I once cried over cheap wine became a filming location. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the studio lights, hair, silver, shoulders squared, voice unshakable, and I wouldn't recognize myself. Not the widow in grief, not the mother begging her son for respect, but the queen who learned that the best revenge isn't destroying others. It's becoming everything they swore you couldn't. On the anniversary of Robert's death, I walked through the garden alone. Daniel's children, my grandchildren, had sent a card, unsigned, just drawings of flowers and a shaky, "We love you, Grandma. Maybe one day, when they're older, they'll know the truth. Maybe one day, they'll choose who their family really is." I whispered to the air, "Robert, you played the longest game of chess, but I learned how to finish it." And then I poured myself a glass of champagne, sat in my sunlit kitchen, and toasted to survival. Honey, if you're still watching, don't forget to subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Because my story isn't just mine. It's yours too if you've ever been dismissed, betrayed, or told you were too old. Family? No, that's DNA. And queens don't bow to DNA. They rewrite the rules of the game.